Hey, welcome back to another edition, another week of Political Breakfast here on WABE. We're all back this week. Have Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson, along with Republican strategist Brian Robinson, and our Atlanta Falcons are 5-3. Woo. So a lot to smile about this morning, right?
You know, Lisa, walk in your trap, take over your trap. That's what we did in Tampa. And let me help my boy B-Rob. So B-Rob, a rapper named Bankroll Fresh, a rapper at Bankroll Fresh, got murdered outside of a studio. Has this song called "Walk in Your Trap, Take Over Your Trap." So Kirk Cousins, as we refer to him, is Lil Kirko. Early in the week, and he talked about how he had a teammate that said, you know, we're going to walk in your trap and take over your trap. So in sort of, you know, political terms, that means that we're going to walk into Tampa Bay Stadium and there's their trap, and we're going to take over that trap by beating them. And that's what happened this past Sunday. So shout out to the Falcons.
Wow, and they looked good too, didn't they? They looked good.
They did. And look, I get a little bit of cultural education every week here. No idea. I had never heard anything that Tharon just said before this moment. Not a word, not one name, not one slogan, nothing. I had heard none of it.
But you know what, though, B-Rob, we went over to the Carter Center. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, and you know, we were the first up, but we had the entire WABE 90.1 staff there, and so like you, B-Rob, I left not knowing that this station was that focused on the culture, from finances to healthcare to food places. So I'm just trying to fit in what I think the station is going. It's, you know, helping you out with a little culture.
All things Atlanta, everything that makes Atlanta this great city that it is, right? And all eyes, as we know, as you guys know in particular, all eyes are on Atlanta, on the state of Georgia. You two have been busy. You have the Rotary this week, and we're doing Political Breakfast live this week, talking about politics, and particularly this presidential election. We've got Trump stumping again this week here in Atlanta, and on and on and on. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? What are you all hearing? This race is still neck and neck, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly on the national poll level, and we saw polling coming out this weekend. It was national polling that had them basically in a dead heat. But obviously, the national polls don't mean anything. They're practically worthless in this scenario. And under the current electoral college system, as it plays out across the country, Democrats really need to have a 4-5 point national polling average lead in order to win the election. You know, we saw Hillary Clinton going into the election day with a national polling lead in 2016 and then lost narrowly because what it came down to was the swing states. So Trump lost the popular vote, but won by just enough in a couple of states. Now Georgia is one of those states, and this year I really do believe, looking at the early voting numbers, that Donald Trump is headed toward a victory in this state. I do not pretend to be an expert on what's happening in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, but looking at it from the homeland here in Georgia, you're seeing massive rural turnout. Republicans, thank God, have learned their lesson from 2020 that you don't tell your voters that the machines don't work. You don't tell your voters to not vote absentee or to not vote early if that's what's convenient and helpful to them to cast their vote. Now Republicans are really pushing the early voting. And in recent cycles, we've seen Democrats come into early voting, build up a massive lead that Republicans then had to chip away at on the back end. And we may be in a scenario where we're going into Election Day much more narrowly divided on the partisan end. But I do think Trump goes in with an advantage. We saw Brandon Phillips from the Trump campaign coming out and saying in the media this week that he thinks Republicans have a 80,000 vote margin in early voting. Look, that's not a science. There's a lot of art in that prediction, but it does show the confidence that the Trump team feels about Georgia. And, you know, before this show airs, after we tape, Trump's going to be back in Georgia, speaking at Georgia Tech, doing a faith event in Powder Springs as well. The Trump team thinks it's going to win, but they're obviously continuing to invest time and energy in this state.
Tharon, I don't know. Remind me, was Hillary Clinton ahead in the polls with like 5% when she ran? And I don't know, what are you saying about the polls? And what do you want to say? What messaging do you want to send to Democrats who are watching these polls very, very closely and who are nervous about what the polls are indicating at this point?
Well, let me try to answer the Hillary Clinton question. Lisa, you've heard me say this before. A lot of us Obama alumni folks, because we wanted to go and make some money and, launch our entrepreneurial careers. Some people went to corporate. Some folks continue organizing. We thought Hillary Clinton was going to win that election. While I remember doing the I'm With Her campaign early on in Midtown, going into Election Day, I remember traveling to New York and looking up thinking I was going to see this glass ceiling break. And I was feeling pretty confident. So I don't remember it being quite 5%, but I do remember her having a sizable lead. When I say sizable, I mean like 1% to 2%. In key battleground states like Michigan,
Yep.
Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. I never thought that she was going to be able to win Georgia in 2016. I was hoping that she was going to win Florida, but Florida, we got a surprise there with Donald Trump, and of course he won North Carolina. Now, let's talk about, what I thought my good friend B-Rob was going to say, Lisa, because I like to keep him in check. He keeps me in check, too. I remember once upon a time when the question was asked, do we think that the voting turnout was going to be high or low in this election? My friend on the right said,
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Here we go. Here we go.
Look, I got my coffee. Look, Lisa, I got
Back
my coffee
to that,
this
right?
morning. I'm sorry I got a little echo. I forgot my headphones, you all.
Yeah.
But
ready.
But one thing I respect about Brian, he's a man of his word. And he told me privately that he may not have gotten this one right. And when we talked about it at B-Rob, you may remember that was Thursday. So Lisa,
Right.
as we tape now, we have surpassed the early vote numbers that was in 2020. I have been saying on this podcast now for almost 8 years now, right, Brian, that demographic changes were going to happen. And we know in Georgia, if the turnout is high, that always favors Democrats. What has changed? We can't assume that every white voter who's going into early vote is voting for Donald Trump. I think that a lot of these white, disaffected, Republican, college-educated women are not telling their spouses nor their best friends at the nail salon or at coffee brunch on Sundays who they're voting for. I think there's a quiet movement of women who are going in there, whether they're motivated about reproductive freedom, motivated about being safe, motivated about their parents or their ailing family members who want access to affordable health care. I think that if you look at the recent AJC poll that showed that 55% of the people who voted thus far have been women, we know that Donald Trump was just being talked about last week, Lisa, about another woman. I think now it's upwards to plus 200 claims about this man sexually harassing and assaulting them. And so I don't think he has run a really good campaign motivating women to go out and vote for him. What he has done is what Brian has been laser-like focused on in this podcast, is getting independent white men and going after black men. Now, let me push back again. This whole notion that black men are just flocking to Donald Trump and going to vote for him, that's a false flag. What it is doing is that it's depressing the vote. It's raising apathy, depressing the vote, and I think a lot of black men are like, hey, I like Trump, but I don't necessarily want to go vote for him, so I'm going to send this one out. I got some concerns about Kamala Harris. But here's why I got hope, and this is why I'm going to call it on this podcast. Kamala Harris is going to win this election, Lisa, and she's going to get upwards to plus 280 electoral votes. I think she has a great chance of winning Georgia because they're spending $27 million on television in the last 2 weeks of this campaign, $7 million more than what the Trump campaign is spending. They have outspent the campaign on the ground and on television. When you have 35 offices open up across the state, 40,000 plus volunteers, 40 paid workers all throughout the state. And let me just bring it home. You don't bring Spike Lee, Samuel L. Jackson, Barack Obama, Tyler Perry, Ossoff,
Bruce Springsteen.
I'm getting to Bruce. Let me roll to Bruce. Yeah. Getting to Bruce, right? Because that's my play to the middle. Michael Conner, right? And you make a play for the middle. You're bringing out Bruce Springsteen. A lot of people want to see him in concert. So I think we're closing with a great message. We probably don't have enough time to get into today, but at Trump rallies, we're seeing that Latino people are being insulted. saying that there's a small island of garbage called Puerto Rico. So you saw J-Lo and Ricky Martin and other Latino people, in particular Puerto Rican folks, come out. I think his name is Bad Bunny, come out and basically take his endorsement back from Donald Trump. And so I think that Donald Trump is unhinged. I think his campaign is all over the place. Whereas with the Harris campaign, Walz campaign, are not only focused on winning Georgia. I was just in Chicago and Milwaukee and knocking on doors, Lisa. They're fired up. And I think that the turnout, early voting, I will give Republicans some credit. They learned from us 4 years ago. They now are starting to tell their people to go out, not only vote, but to vote early. But I think that we got to get the African-American number up a little bit. It's at 26% now. And we can get it up to about 26, 27. I think that's fine. And we got to definitely pick off a few moderate independent voters and undecideds.
Yeah.
These allegations involving the women, Brian, are they having the impact that they may have had, let's say, 4, 5, 6 years ago?
No, I don't think nothing that touches Donald Trump seems to matter at this juncture. He's sort of Teflon man as far as charges like that go. And I think a lot of it is, I think
Which is unfortunate.
People who don't like that or would not vote for someone because of that, they may have made their mind up about Trump many, many years ago. And then there are those who believe, look, I'm not electing a pope. I'm electing somebody who's going to get our economy right, who's going to make for a strong America. I hear that all the time from voters. So they make a differentiation there. So I don't think it's making a difference. I do want to acknowledge what Tharon is saying. I said on this show that I thought we were going to have lower turnout than 2020 because I saw apathy and low energy in the electorate. And let me say, I'm going to make this really clear and short. I was wrong. We have had tremendous turnout. Despite all of these voter suppression laws that we've just had people somehow getting over those impossible barriers and getting to the polls, somehow without the water bottles being handed out to them. I don't know how they're doing it, but I think they're resilient and they're so strong that they're able to power through. But to the larger point, I want to point out here that Georgia is different. We have really high turnout. If you look at the other swing states, they are not turning out in early voting the way that Georgians have. Much less energy thus far. Maybe they're going to have a huge election day turnout, which will lead to a very late night spillover into Wednesday probably. But Georgia's vote is going to be clocked basically by election day. Brad Raffensperger said on the Brett Baer show last week that 70% of the votes will be early and they should be counted by 8 p.m. on election night. And so that only leaves 30% on election day to figure out. So I hope he's not overpromising something that can't be delivered, but I hope what he's saying can come true because I think early returns tend to increase voter trust in the outcome. So yes, I was wrong. But nationally, we're seeing that Georgia is an outlier when it comes to the energy. And I'm shocked by it because I don't, although maybe I shouldn't be. Because I'll tell you, and Tharon and I have discussed this before, signs, if you're a political operative, you roll your eyes about signs, right? Because candidates and their spouses and their supporters are obsessed with signs. And operatives know they don't matter, right? Uh-huh. But it does show engagement of the electorate to some degree. In my neighborhood, is full up on signs in a way that I haven't seen in the 8 years that I've lived here. And it is evenly divided. And this is, my precinct is one that is a bellwether for the state. So watch what happens here at the Ashford Park Elementary Precinct.
Last week, Tharon, we talked about the television ads and how, we're starting to see more and more of them. Are any of those sticking out to you in terms of the messaging, and are they making an impact in your opinion?
I think they're definitely making an impact for two reasons. One is the repetition of them, and it's where they're being strategically placed. Mm-hmm. As someone who still watches mm-hmm. cable television and network television, I do often mm-hmm. visit Hulu. As you know, I have a 4-year-old son, so I'm always on Prime Video looking out for Bluey and Blimpy. And it's Blimpy and Mia.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They pop up
And
everywhere on
I mean, seriously,
YouTube.
then you
Yeah,
gotta go on
right.
Peacock because for some strange reason, Lisa, I can't watch Thursday night football on my. So what I'm saying to you is, it's kind of like out of the network, right? Out of the area. So they're not just advertising on network.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a story that came out of AJC. WSB and Fox 5, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, B-Rob, WSB made pretty close, upwards to $40 million in TV, but I think Fox 5 was like right behind.
46 million.
46 million. I am a moderate capitalist I'm a Democrat,
and then,
so I definitely know how to count. And so what I think is happening now, Lisa, is my good friend Bakari Sellers, who was in town recently, who B-Rob knows, made a good point on CNN, and there were some critical points about why are you having these big rallies. I mean, let's not forget, Kamala Harris drew 25,000 plus people in DeKalb County and Clarkston. And you bring out Bruce Springsteen, and you look at that crowd, Lisa, it was truly diverse. And so they're in true GOTV mode. There's no more money they can spend on television. So now what you're seeing is the money is being allocated on the ground, turning out voters, making sure that people know that they're registered to vote, that they need to go and vote. The thing that is interesting to me, when I went and voted on Saturday, I live not far from B-Rob. I don't have a manicured lawn anymore, but I do have a 3-car garage. So yes,
that's a lie.
You know,
There's a lie.
Garage. But when I went there, Lisa, I saw a lot of white women voting, some of whom stopped me. And we have a local race. Susie Greenberg is running against Deborah Silcox. And that particular Chastain Park precinct was packed. But what's going on now, Lisa, to kind of take our listeners behind the scenes, you know, beyond the rhetoric, these campaigns know who have voted already. So beyond me literally going to my cell phone every 2 minutes saying stop and then, you know, swiping to the left and delete, I should stop getting the text messages. Now, if I'm still getting text messages and I'm still getting emails and calls, then they need to fire their daddy team. And so Republicans or Democrats, Lisa, they kind of know who's voted so far. I think that this week, right here, and Brian knows what I'm about to say, this week of early voting, when we tape this podcast again next week, Lisa, we'll be able to give you a true feeling of where we are. Because as Brad Raffensperger also predicted, Brian, is that he thinks that this closing week going to early voting is going to be a surge. And so if Democrats can make up some ground, Republicans are voting larger than expected. Traditionally in Georgia, we have to match the enthusiasm of Republicans on Election Day. I think we not only have to match their enthusiasm, I think we have to outperform them on Election Day. And, you know, 80% of these people who have voted so far are people who vote early anyway. And so I think that who's going to be able to use certain tactics, certain data, certain strategies to get these low propensity voters out who don't traditionally vote in presidential elections, or maybe who have just moved here. That's where I think the operatives on both sides are going to be put to the test. But I think that the team in Georgia that Harris and Walz has, Lisa, these women and men are battle tested. I'm getting, you know, messagings and numbers. And I'll tell you this, you will bring Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama to Atlanta and to Georgia, the second gentleman to Savannah. They did Souls to the Polls this past weekend. A lot of pastors were encouraging their memberships to go to the polls. And so I think, you know, by Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, we'll be able to give you a true snapshot of where this race is headed.
You know, I heard today a story. They're all fighting for this small swath of undecided voters. Who are those undecided voters here in Georgia, do you think?
Young people.
Is it the Asian Americans that we're hearing about? Who are those undecideds?
I think it's.
Tharon's right. Young people, the Gen Zs are one of them.
The Gen Zs? Mm-hmm.
Gen Zs are definitely one of them. I think Asian voters, some Latino voters are undecided. And believe it or not, Lisa, I mean, I think if you're under the age of 50, again, going back to the numbers, the largest two voting groups thus far are 50 and older. And then they go 65 and older. But the people 50 and under are haven't voted. And I think a lot of these people are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen, or they just, for some reason, either not going to vote at all. And that's what worries me.
Yeah. To Tharon's point, Tharon's right about that. And when it comes to black men, because we're seeing Trump getting historically high numbers of black men in polling. Now, Tharon may be right. A lot of those guys probably aren't sold on it and we just won't vote. Maybe we'll skip the line, whatever. But if Trump gets 20, some of the percent of black men, it's going to be really hard for Harris to make up that difference. But I do think some of them are probably struggling with what to do in these final days. I want to focus on one other group, though, and it's the Nikki Haley voter. And this is a demographic that is concentrated in the 4 core counties of Atlanta. You saw Haley almost win the primaries in Fulton and DeKalb. Now, granted, DeKalb County doesn't have a lot of Republican voters, percentage-wise, but the county's so big that those of us who do live here, we end up having a fairly notable amount of votes. So where do those voters go this year? Because if you hear the stuff that appealed to them about Nikki Haley, one of it was an issue like standing up for Ukraine, making sure that America continues to see Ukraine win that war. That is not what Donald Trump has been saying on the campaign trail. Nikki Haley voters are going to have a different view on some of these tariffs that Donald Trump is talking about. And so when Republicans tell doubting Republicans, wavering Republicans, well, you got to vote on the policies. It's the policies that matter. A lot of these Nikki Haley voters say, yeah, I'm not necessarily all there on the policies, right? Mm-hmm. And Kamala Harris was speaking to some of those issues in her convention speech. She talked about standing up for Ukraine. She talked about having the strongest fighting force in the world. She was speaking to some of those national defense conservatives that, aren't necessarily aligned with Donald Trump politically on some of those policies as far as America's role in the world. Regardless of what they may think about the character issues or the charges that are made against him or the breathless coverage today about the off-color remarks made at the Madison Square Garden rally, even if you tune all that out, like those Nikki Haley voters, they're somewhere in a different space, a space that's not being covered by either candidate. Where do they go? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe they split.
Tharon, is there really a faction of black male voters who will not vote at all? At all?
Lisa, I said this. I'm in these streets every day. And my colleagues laugh at me because I intentionally go to the barbershop. Shout out to Off the Hook on Peter Street. And I go there intentionally, Lisa, to one, get a nice shaved head and make sure that my barber, JJ, takes care of my goatee and skin. But I also just go there because I want to hear what black men are saying. And I have yet to have a black male customer other than Vernon Jones. And yes, B-Rob, Vernon Jones goes to my barbershop right now. When he's in there and I'm in there,
really,
there's not much haircut going on because we in everybody's faces, and Vernon actually is a very, he's a good debater.
I was like, what is that like? I would like a camera in there when that during that moment. What is that like?
Vernon, for those of our listeners, is a former CEO of DeKalb County Democrat who served in the legislature and then switched to Republican party last time around, right? B-Rob in 2020, and then ran unsuccessfully for governor. We forget that this guy actually ran in a primary, and or did he drop out? Did he run? I think he stayed in.
He dropped out and then ran for the 10th congressional district and lost to Mike Collins.
That's right. So this guy's been around for anyway. So my point is, Lisa, there are the Vernon Joneses of the world that have come out and said, "Hey, I like Donald Trump." I hear these conversations are being had. And the reason I call it a false flag, none of these black men are saying, "Hey, I'm running to vote for Trump." Now, there are a few. There are a couple. And a lot of these people I've known for a while, they've been Republicans. But there's a difference between being a Republican and a Trump supporter. And we know that Donald Trump has destroyed the traditional Republican Party that many of these black men identify themselves with. But what I think is happening is they're scared. They're scared because they don't, there's a level of sexism that comes along with it too, Lisa, if I'm just going to be real. I'm a huge proponent of whatever a woman wants to do, she can do. You know this. I have an all-woman team. There are women all on my team in my firm, right? And so clearly through my actions and through my work, I think that women can do anything they want to do. And I think a woman is totally prepared to lead this country and be president. However, Lisa, there are some men, not just black men, there are a lot more white men that don't want to vote for Kamala Harris because she's a woman and she's a black woman. And so We have to take them very seriously. There's been a laser-like focus on talking to them about their issues. It's all rooted around public safety, the economy, being able to protect and provide for their families. And I was very happy to see that Kamala Harris came out with 5 initiatives. Donald Trump has not done this, specifically what she's going to do for black men. I didn't realize how big the crypto industry was, where a lot of black entrepreneurs had their money tied up in crypto. And now she's going to, bring some relief to that. And so it's just strategic things that she's doing. But I think that this issue around black men, Lisa, if I have to be very honest with you, it's existed in Georgia for a long time. I mean, I can go all the way back to 2012. We were having conversations about getting more black men involved to re-elect Barack Obama. And he was a black male. I think what it's done now is that Donald Trump and the Republican Party, which Brian has been giving us warning signs now for months, have finally put some money towards trying to galvanize this second largest voting group for Democrats all across the country. We're the second largest voting group. There's only one voting group that votes in higher numbers than Democrats than we do, and that is black women. So my message to black women is this: don't worry about the brothers. We're going to do what we have to do. Yes, we've been complaining a little bit, and yes, we've been making excuses and wanting some attention. But ultimately, I think the brothers are going to do the right thing and go out and vote for Kamala Harris.
We haven't talked about Governor Kemp in a minute. He's been kind of quiet since we last saw him with Trump standing side by side. Is that by design, do you think?
Well, he hasn't been quiet. That's not totally true.
Okay.
And his political operation has been spending a lot of money out there pushing Trump. And as they're doing so, pushing down ticket Republicans. The reason why I say he hasn't been quiet personally is he spent the entire weekend doing in-person campaign events for state house candidates.
Yeah.
And so there was some in Gwinnett, some in North Fulton, and then some out in rural Georgia, and just getting some huge crowds,
Which benefits him, yeah.
Oh, absolutely, more. Man.
Yeah, which benefits him more, yeah.
I mean, it's great politics for Brian Kemp. And look, I apologize if Tharon's had to hear this so many times, but self-interest properly understood as it comes to Kemp. Kemp wants to have a strong Republican majority in the state House and state Senate. I don't care what gets said publicly. That is priority number one for Brian Kemp in 2024, as it should be, because that impacts his ability to govern the state and get his agenda through. What Brian Kemp knows is that the better Donald Trump does in Georgia, the better and the stronger the Republican majority in the state House is. There's only one state Senate race that's really up for grabs. That's the Sean Steele race up in Gwinnett County. Democrats don't really have any other targets there. Republicans, for the first time in a long time, have some targeted pickups opportunities in the state House. As they've been losing seats steadily over the last decade because they had a supermajority in 2012, and of course, the electorate just doesn't reflect a supermajority for either party. So we've been gliding toward parity. So this is one of the first times that Republicans have legitimate pickup chances. And Brian Kemp's out there on the front lines, not only defending incumbents, which has been our MO in recent cycles, but also challengers. There are a couple of districts, for example, in Gwinnett County that are represented by Democrats, but Brian Kemp won those seats in 2022. That's a good opportunity. Tharon mentioned the Greenberg-Silcox race in Sandy Springs, Roswell, and Buckhead. That's a 50-50 race and could be very telling about where the state goes. And there's one other to watch, I would point out to our listeners, and it's in Middle Georgia, and there's the Republican. It's an open seat. The Republican is Noah Harbuck. The Democrat is Tangi Herring, maybe?
You know who
yes.
she is. I showed you that mail piece the other day.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know who this black woman
and so
is.
That's a 50-50 race. Oh, absolutely. We're trying to win that seat. We're attacking a Democrat in an open seat. Yes, we are. And so those two races are really two fun ones to watch because that Harbuck-Herring race is an open seat in Middle Georgia. Democrats thought that they had the end there, and now it's very competitive.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a lot to watch. These next
real quickly.
few weeks.
I agree with Brian. Governor Brian Kemp has not been quiet. I've seen videos of him in rallies or fundraisers with Republicans, encouraging them to get out to vote. The level of spending between Governor Brian Kemp, the House Majority Caucus, Kelly Loeffler, and probably some other money that I don't know about, they're outspending us locally, Lisa. And when I say we Democrats locally in the state house and state senate races, and it's kind of quiet. It's similar to what we did in 2020. In 2018, as you know, everyone knew that Stacey Abrams had this huge organization that had all this funding. We kind of quieted the noise a little bit in 2020 and just got to work and sort of had outside, money and groups coming in to help us. And so I think the Republicans have definitely learned how to imitate and to replicate what Democrats did in 2020 to win. In 2022, you had an incumbent governor, so they didn't do as much. But the money that Brian Kemp is spending, Speaker Burns, I don't know what Burt is doing, B-Rob, I'm sure it's something significant as well. That worries me. And then Tangi Herron is a phenomenal woman down in the Macon area, educator, running in a race that B-Rob is right. We still think is winnable for her. And she's raising the money, but she's being attacked very, very aggressively, and it is an open seat. And so I think that is one to definitely watch as well. But it shows you how important the state house and state senate is to both parties, but particularly to the governor and the speaker and the lieutenant governor, who's spending a lot of money and time going after these Democratic candidates.
Okay,
absolutely.
Corrected. Sorry, Governor Kemp. Sorry about that.
Yeah, he's out there. He's working
the
hard.
presidential candidates so closely. Oh my gosh.
But
Trump and Harris, they're at it. So sorry about that.
Theron's raising a good point here. That state house really is the front lines of the battle in Georgia this year, beyond the presidential.
Yeah.
In the 8 years of political breakfast, Tharon and I have never mentioned the names of state house members as much as we have in this cycle. We're sitting there talking about a Macon area house district race, right? We've never done that before.
Wow.
And it just goes to show this is a really exciting political matchup to watch really across the board. And, my eyes are going to be glued to some of these numbers on election night.
Oh, wow. Interesting point. Okay, well, more to come. We're coming back later this week again for a live edition of Political Breakfast. We're going to put that up on our website, too, later this week. So we hope you all will join us for that. And you guys, you're going to the Rotary, so we'll hear about that and talk about that a little as well. So have a great day, and thanks for checking in, as always.
Yes, absolutely. And please go to the website and order your tickets for Wednesday morning. You need a ticket to get in, and you get to come to the studio and be with us in person. It'll be a lot of fun.
And Lisa, I'm so proud. I actually posted it on my Instagram. So Sherry should be proud of me for actually encouraging people to go out. So I had to make that post before we start taping because I asked for all these different graphics and language, and to not post it would have been disingenuous. But it's up. It's on my social media.
Great.
All right. Check us out on social media as well. All right.
Look forward to
see y'all
seeing
soon.
everybody. All righty.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.